Elizabeth Devecchi, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great to have you on. We are right on the heels of the launch of your very first novel, A Whisper in the Dark. Congratulations.
Thank you. This has been a long time coming.
Well, let's talk about that. Tell us before we get to the story itself, and I definitely want to find out why you're interested in horror and why horror kind of gets you going. But tell us about your journey. How long have you been thinking about this book?
But about this book, not as long, about writing a book for a very long time. But, there's family and health things, and we moved a lot. So it's been hard to kind of sit down and write. And I have three children. Now my youngest is 15, so they're a little more independent. And I was walking my dog, who's here at my feet. You can't see him. He's a big part of the book, A Whisper in the Dark. And I was walking him. Uh, it was the last home we lived in, and he suddenly wouldn't go anywhere near storm sewers, just absolutely terrified. He's a quirky rescue dog, but this was like beyond the pale. He just wouldn't go. He would rather get hit by a car than go near a storm sewer. And that was something new. So I don't know, in my mind, I just started thinking, huh, I wonder why he could be afraid of the storm sewers. And then my imagination kicked in. And then I thought to myself, if I don't sit down and do this now, when am I going to do it? So I sat down and wrote it out, and here we are.
All right, let's come back to the next level quirky dog and the storms. But tell us going, preceding this point, had you been writing fiction and tell us, kind of where did you move from to Colorado? How long have you been sort of thinking about creative writing?
I have been thinking about creative writing for a very long time. I have notebooks full of stories that some of them I have to find because we did move several times. They end up in boxes and they're not something you need right away, but now I kind of feel like I need them. So I've been writing for a very long time. I had some short stories out. I wrote a blog when my children were younger, and it was kind of scratching the itch, the writing itch. And then I suddenly found out I'm not a very tech savvy person. I just, I found this place I could set up a blog. I started writing a blog and I called it The Moon, the Sun, and Little Man. And that's representing my three children. And suddenly I found I had like 7,500 people. Yeah. And I don't know where they came from. I didn't really understand. It was mostly just to scratch the itch that I was writing this. And I have actually pulled back from the blog because when you scratch the itch, it doesn't itch as much. And when you're writing the actual stories and novels, you need to have that drive to keep going. And I felt like, right, I do the blog occasionally, but I felt like when I did the blog, it was kind of, oh, okay, I feel better now, and then go off to do something else. So
Right. Right. Wow. And when did you first try a full length novel? How long ago was that? And was that horror? Have you always been kind of attracted to horror?
I have this was actually my first full length novel that I wrote.
Okay.
I did like a nonfiction thing that a long story, horrible thing that happened with a house, termites, all that. But and that kind of it was cathartic for me to write it down. But as far as novels, this was my first full length novel.
Wow. Wow. That's impressive.
Thank you.
That's very impressive. So how, we'll get back to the contents of the story here, and I can't wait to find out more about where the sewers and the dog stuff led in terms of plot and character. I know we have a journalist in there. Um, Tell me, just what went into your process to put together your first novel? What were the biggest challenges just from the execution side of pulling it together?
Right. My biggest challenge was time and juggling things that I needed to do for the kids. Also, as the was it home manager, all of those things. So it was mainly finding time because what I tried to explain to some of my friends, like, oh, just write it this time. if your mind isn't in the right space to write, it's not going to happen. So, a lot of times you'll be driving in carpool, and that's when the creative bug hits you, where you can't really write while you're driving in carpool. So that was a huge challenge. Another challenge is I think came from my personality type. I'm an INFJ. Was it Breyer? Uh, my brain is Meyer-Briggs or Briggs-Meyer. But anyway, an INFJ, and I found a friend of mine told me there was a book, The INFJ Writer, and I bought the book, and it really felt like whoever wrote this book was hiding in my home somewhere and watching me. And it really hit on a lot of my challenges, one of which was every time I would open the document, I would start editing stuff from the beginning and wasn't moving forward. It was a snail's pace. So as soon as I recognized that through reading that book, I stopped doing it. And that just rocketed me forward to finish this. And I tell that to my oldest, who, and actually the older two are both writers in their own genres. But I told them, just vomit it all out and then you can work with it later. But if you're constantly going back and changing things, you're never going to move forward. So I think those were I was one of my biggest challenges, and finding time was the other one.
Yeah. How long did it take you to pull the novel together? And then how long did it take you to get it to a point where you thought you were ready to submit? Tell us the story about how you kind of got to a point where it was ready to bring out to the world.
So I feel like I've been in the right place at the right time, because right now horror and women in horror specifically are booming. So that was just a right time, right place kind of thing. But it took me about 6 months to write the novel. And then I am obsessive about editing. So I'll go back and then I'll go back again and try to, and it doesn't matter how many times you go back because your brain knows what's supposed to be there. And so sometimes your eyes can't see it. So then I sent it out to beta readers and got some feedback that way. And I thought, well, it generally takes months for a publisher that you're just writing to out of nowhere. I bought all the books, the indie publishers, went online, got everything ready to submit. And I thought, I've got months, right? So they ask for your first 3 chapters in general. I
Right.
went through those with a fine tooth comb and just got all the wrinkles out of it. And I sent it in thinking I've got plenty time to go back. Well, it was only a week later, 2 weeks later, that they requested the entire novel. So then I'm, scrambling. Yes, it's written, it's finished, but I was horrified or terrified to send it out, that there would be all these typos. And so I got my butt moving and edited the rest of it and sent it out. And soon thereafter, I had I had one offer and one were still interested. And I went with the offer. And I'm glad I did, because I love my publisher.
Which is,
Wicked House Publishing.
and where are they out of?
New York, and New York upstate. And it's a indie publisher, small indie publisher, a lot of fantastic writers, mostly horror, some thriller too, thriller suspense. In fact, they signed my second novel too, and that is thriller suspense more than horror, though I would call it horror adjacent. But yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, and obviously you didn't need an agent. You could just do it over
Right,
the, yeah, very
right.
good. Wow, what a feeling.
Yes, it was amazing. And then but then you have to wait, because then it gets sent to their editors, and then you have that whole process. So I would say start to finish, and then they put it into the slot that it fits into in their schedule as well. So it took about 18 months to be actually published and out into the world.
Yeah. So I have a question, and I don't mean, I'm just curious about your thought process, because that's such wonderful reaction from an indie publisher in very little time. It's fantastic. Did part of you think this might be good enough? And I'm not saying anything about traditional publishing that's better than indie publishing. I'm not saying that at all. But did part of you say, I wonder if I should go get an agent and see if this is worth even more? It might be a longer process. It might not lead to anything, but if I've got a really good book and this
Hmm.
publisher. I'm just wondering if you stopped at that point or you just said,
I
nope.
mean, I had two indie publisher, and by indie, they're traditional publishers. They're
Right,
just smaller. So
right.
I didn't have to do anything. It wasn't, I didn't have to contribute money into the process. It's a
Oh,
traditional publisher. But there was another indie publisher that was also interested. So I kind of thought, I'm an unknown. I'm a complete unknown. Nowadays, it is so hard to break in. And I'm in my 50s. And in all honesty, I felt like this was a good fit after looking at some of their other authors. And I also felt like, you got to grab on when the bar's coming past, you're heading for the with the we I used to go on the T bar for skiing. You got to grab that bar or you're gonna miss it. So that was my feeling.
I like that analogy. I was just curious,
Hmm.
a lot of people out there, a lot of writers are making these choices now about, there's so many, it's so stratified in
Hmm.
terms of all the different options that you have from self-publishing and doing it
Yep.
yourself, hybrid, independent publishers who don't charge you anything and just take your book, but the advances might be very small, or no advance, just we're just going to publish your book.
Hmm.
Um, right up through, going through an agent and going for that sort of typical traditional contract, which still may not get you any more readers
Right.
by any means. I just think it's
Right.
an interesting kind of choice. Yeah.
Well, and I think the genre also makes a difference. Like fantasy, I think is a completely different world. And probably, I don't know, your best bet for fantasy might be aiming for an agent and something big. Horror, there's this web of writers, readers, publishers that if you can be in the right place at the right time with the right novel, uh, it can take off. So my novel got into the right hands. This was something that was completely out of my control, and before it was even published, was requested to be in a Halloween box for a group. So they immediately took like 350 copies before it even came out. So it is again, right place, right time. It's that there are so many talented writers out there, and I don't think I'm, more talented than a lot of them. I just think I was there in the right place. So I'm glad I grabbed the bar.
Yeah. Well, and not to belabor the point, I hope I don't mean to be, I'm just think it's an interesting discussion. This choice that you made, you don't know where it's going to lead.
Right.
You could have a hit on your hands, and suddenly the agents and publishers will be coming to you.
That would
Um,
be nice.
so, I mean, you literally don't know, and none of
Right.
us where
Hmm.
one thing leads to the next. Okay, I am. Thank you for that discussion. All right, a whisper in the dark. Take us.
Yes.
Where did this moment with your dog? Give us the general setup. I don't want to give anything away, but
Okay.
give us the general description of the story.
So it is a small town creature horror, and it's very psychological. I am very much a slow burn. I want to make you feel for my characters, relate to my characters before I start messing with them. So it's very psychological, but there is a creature. And it plays on emotions, mostly rage and fear, and anger and fear, and how those emotions can be used to manipulate us.
Tell us about your main character.
So it has a few main characters, and one of them, by the way, I initially had not planned to be a main character, but she kind of stepped up while I was writing it, and I thought she's a lot more complex than I had given her credit. So there's a family. The mother's name is Sarah, and that's the journalist that you're referring to. So Sarah's the mother. Her son Sam, who's one of the more main or central characters, their dog Alvis, and then Sam has a sister, but she's not really a principal character, and the dad Greg. And then there's the neighbor across the street, an elderly gentleman named Ben. And he and his now since past wife are also central to the story.
And you're telling it from multiple points of view.
Yes.
Okay. rotating,
Yes.
rotating around.
Yes. And there's another character that jumps in when you think you have everyone that's going to come into play in, there's a character that jumps in like 20, chapter 20 something, and his name is Jacob.
Hmm. And what is the appeal to you? Why is horror having a moment? It's so funny how the genres kind of come and go and
Hmm.
different times, but what is the appeal to you?
I mean, I started reading, I guess you could call it kiddie horror, when I was younger. So things like Lois Duncan, my favorite, like Third Eye, Stranger with My Face, that kind of thing. And then when I was a little bit older, but not old enough to be down there, I found my parents had a library in their furnace room, and that's where all the good books were. So I found Carrie and Audrey Rose, Omen, Jaws, and I was a huge scaredy cat as a child. I never went on roller coasters. That's since changed, but I was just I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to, but something drew me to those books. And I feel like it almost made me stronger because, first of all, what that guy's going through in that book, what I'm going through is fine compared to what that poor guy's going through, or gal or child or whatever. And then when you finish the book and it's resolved and you're still alive, it gives you a
Yeah.
feeling of power as a child. So that kind of drew me into horror, and it was um, I'm more a fan of relatable horror, so psychological and things that can happen in a space where I would easily be, like in a small town, or in my living room, in the basement, more so than horror that's completely removed from me.
I've always wondered how a horror writer knows that they're delivering the the jump scare or the actual scare or the thrill. You're in the moment writing it. It's how do you know that it's going to have that impact with the
You
reader?
don't. You don't. But this is the thing. I mean, we're all human beings. So there are lines that go through all of us. So some of the things I think if this terrifies me, most likely there are people out there that will also be terrified by this. But I think in the moment you don't, like, there were things in the book that I didn't necessarily think were that scary that other people told me were the things that really bothered them. So it's very subjective.
Yeah, nice. Does the journalist role, the fact that she's a journalist, do we watch her being a reporter as well, or is that something in her past? Is that just sort of a mentality that she brings to the story?
A little bit. I mean, it's not, it's more her curiosity as a
Mm.
journalist. And at the beginning, we find out that she was a serious journalist, but for various reasons moved her family to kind of start over. And so she's writing fluff pieces, not real happy about it. So I think there's also that part of her inside that yearns to be a serious journalist again.
Gotcha. Nice, nice. And let me just guess without giving anything away, you can just hold a blank face at the end of this question, and then, you know, people won't know the answer, but is the creature in the sewer?
Sometimes. Sometimes.
Good answer. Good
Yes.
answer.
I mean, I had a thing that I did I did like a raffle during the book launch party. And one of the things I had was a dog collar that says doggy knows best, because, a lot of times your animals pick up on things that you may not pick up on. So,
They do all the time. Absolutely.
mhm.
Yep. So, what have you learned about marketing and getting your book out in the hands of readers, this first time around the track for you?
So that has for me, that's been harder than writing the book because as an author, you're in your space, you can close yourself off. When you're marketing, you cannot do that. So I've learned how to do interviews. My 15-year-old son taught me how to use Canva because he used it for school, so I could put out little advertising pictures. Um, I think my thing that I learned was find something that people I don't know, that clicks with people. For some reason, that my dog, who I can't take out into these public spaces, so I made like a cutout of him because he's very quirky and he is afraid of lots of people. So people seem to connect to that, to the dog, to the animal part of it. So I have a whole slew of Canva advertisements with various animals. I even have a little one with my son's behind me. You can see like there's a terrarium. He has blue death feigning beetles, and they're these cool little beetles that flip upside down and pretend they're dead if you bother them. And so I even have a little publicity thing that people really liked with the little beetle holding his miniature copy of the book. So that has the animal connection for this particular book has clicked with people. I also have a little bit of and maybe an unfair advantage because my oldest child, my daughter Alessia, she graduated with a film degree and she made a book trailer for me.
Nice. Yeah.
So, yes, she filmed it in Parker. We used two local kids. I paid them in ice cream. It has an original soundtrack because a buddy she who went to the same school does the soundtracks for her short films. So that's my unfair marketing advantage, but I am going to continue using it. So.
That's great. Is that up on YouTube? And yeah,
Yeah, it's actually, I think she has it on Vimeo, but it's
yeah,
on my webpage. Like if you go on to elizabethdevecchi.com, it's right up top on the webpage.
great, great, excellent. How did you find Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers?
I was trying to remember how I found, I think when we moved here, first you get the kids settled, the school, get all that set up, and then they're not little kids, so play dates aren't a thing anymore. So to meet people who had my same interests, I started looking around for. There's the other one was in Colorado. Oh no, Castle Rock writers. So I would just find these little groups and
Yeah,
events that were going on, and then I found Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers.
yeah, because there's a nice little horror community within RMFW.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
that's great. Excellent. And what's happening with the follow-up? I assume there's got to be another book ready to go or coming
So
along.
the second book, what I've tried to get myself into a cycle where this book's out now. So now I'm doing another edit on the second novel, which was already signed by Wicked House Publishing and should come out maybe late spring or summer. I'm not sure yet.
Wow.
So now I'm re-editing that before the professional editor gets it. And I just finished writing a prequel to A Whisper in the Dark. So.
Is the next book connected to A Whisper in the Dark? No.
The next book is a complete standalone. It's more of a crime thriller suspense type book, and I completely changed everything, point of view, tense, everything for the second book. But the third book, because I had my beta readers saying, well, what happens to so and so? So the third book, I started as a sequel, but then I jumped back to a prequel. So it explores the woman, Mary, who has already passed away in A Whisper in the Dark.
Hmm. And the crime thriller one that comes out next spring, does that have a working title?
Yes, that one actually has a title already, and it's A Twist of the Lens.
Nice, nice.
Yes. The
Yeah.
third one, the title so far is A Shadow Beside Her.
So we've got at least something running through here in terms of consistency, starting with the capital letter A, the word A.
Right, exactly. And then the fourth novel, which I've just started to work on now, is also a stand apart, though my beta reader again was saying, but you don't explain this. Can you do a sequel? So maybe in the future, we'll see. But right now, I kind of want to, stretch my legs, stretch my mind, and do a little bit of everything because I waited so long to get started.
Yeah. You're a writer. You're a writer.
Hmm.
How does it feel? I mean, you are juggling. You've got one book just came out, three in the works, either ready to come out next spring or two more in the pipeline after that. How does this make you feel?
It feels wonderful. My 15-year-old said, "Mom, slow down." And I said, "I can't." I waited too long. I can't. So I also have I have a short story coming out sometime this month, I think, in an anthology called Error Code, and that's a horror, kind of tech gone wrong horror story. There's another one coming out, I think, next summer, also horror. They're longer short stories, and then I have a couple poems. One was in Under Her Eye, which is a collaborative with the Pixel Project against domestic abuse. And then the other one is in Monsters in the Mills, which came out in NecromoniCon last summer. And that's horror about the textile mills and the buckle mill, all the mills that they had in the New England area, which is where I mostly grew up.
Wow. Oh, you grew up in New
So,
England.
yes,
Whereabouts?
Rhode Island.
Ah, I grew up in Massachusetts. So there you go.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we're neighbors.
Very good. Well, Elizabeth, this has been a great rundown. It's so wonderful to have you be part of RMFW, and it's been great hearing about your success. We always like to kind of shine the light on another writer or a book as we wrap up here and kind of pay it forward. So,
Yes, and I wish I had the book right with me, but again, my house is a little bit upside down right now with everything going around, but or going on. But Cassandra O'Sullivan Satcher, she is a college professor and she deep dives into Edgar Allan Poe in her classes and does horror writing classes at her school in Pennsylvania. And she has a novel out called Darkness There But Something More. And then I also just read a collection of short stories that she did that was fantastic. It kind of reminded me of what was the show that Spielberg, where they kind of had the strange things, or I can't remember, but those shows that they had in the 90s and the 80s where they had these short stories about
yeah,
scary things that happened, or that's what
like
it
Twilight
reminded me
Zone or
of.
Black
Yeah, I
Mirror.
like Twilight Zone, Black Mirror, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and her debut novel came out a little bit before mine did, so
Ah, very
same
good.
publisher.
Ah, great. Excellent. Well, Elizabeth, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time. Good luck with A Whisper in the Dark and all your many projects. That's
Thank
fantastic.
you. Thank you.